Cartel coalition raids, veterans farm unaware. It's guarded by the Deadliest Navy SEAL commander. They drove right past me thinking I was just another old farmer with a creaky pickup and a stubborn streak. Marcus Corsair. Hayes whispered into his recorder before flicking it off. The morning mist hovered over Redstone Valley like a ghost, and the sun's first rays sparked tiny diamonds on the dew-soaked grass. At 58, Marcus still carried himself with the poise of a Navy SEAL, broad shoulders squared as he strode past his granddaughter's swing set toward the ancient sequoia that towered over his farmhouse. Its massive red-brown trunk, engraved with the names of tribal elders from generations past, was both a symbol of the valley's resilience and a reminder of the injustices that had stained its soil. Linh Nguyen, the local Vietnamese-American journalist, watched from her vintage Subaru as Marcus stopped beneath the tree's massive canopy. She'd arrived at dawn, her camera-ready heart pounding not for a story, but because she believed in the cause. She believed in Marcus. The valley's multi-ethnic community, white settlers, native tribes, African-American farmers, Latinx ranchers, had been slowly pushed aside by slick developers and hidden criminal networks for decades. Now someone was buying up properties under shell corporations, and the once quiet roads thrummed with black SUVs and foreign accents. Marcus pressed a call button on his watch. Moments later, Officer Javier Ortiz, a tall Hispanic man in plainclothes, pulled into the driveway. "Morning, Corsair," Ortiz said, ducking under the sequoia's hanging branches. "They sent 3 more trucks last night. Plans to reroute the river for their distribution route." Ortiz's voice was calm, but carried an edge of fear. He'd grown up in Portland's tough neighborhoods, and he recognized corporate violence when he saw it. Marcus nodded, scanning the horizon over the valley floor. "They think we're an easy mark. But they don't know that this sequoia isn't just a tree. It's our witness, our oath. Every ring tells a story of survival." He placed a weathered hand against the bark, closing his eyes. A breeze rustled high in the branches. Behind them, the barn doors creaked open. Jamal, the African-American demolition expert, and Elena, a former Army sniper of Irish descent, emerged with loaded cases. Each case clicked shut with the precision of locked safes. "We've got 3 hours until they make their move," Jamal said, voice low. "Then it's on." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life in the valley, farmers who'd lost crops, children who'd cried at roadblocks, tribal families whose sacred lands were desecrated. This was more than a stand for property. It was a stand for justice, for history, for the very soul of Redstone Valley. He looked at Lynn, who raised her camera not to capture violence but to bear witness. In that moment, Marcus felt the storm gathering in his chest, equal parts rage and resolve. "They'll learn tonight what happens when you threaten more than land," he said, voice fierce but measured. "They'll learn that every community has its Corsairs." As the sun crested the ridgelines, casting long shadows over the fields, Marcus turned back to the farmhouse. Somewhere inside lay the cell phone full of coded coordinates, and inside him burned a promise to protect this valley or die trying. The breeze whispered through the sequoia's needles, as if answering him. And in that quiet reply, Marcus heard the first crack of thunder. "Next stop, the battlefield. You really think you can just roll into our valley and buy us off?" Marcus hissed, voice low but shaking with controlled fury, as the black SUVs rumbled into sight. Morning light glinted off polished chrome, turning their tinted windows into dark mirrors. Under the sequoia's vast canopy, he stood with Linh Nguyen's camera trained on him, not for spectacle, but to record this defiance for a nation that seldom heard the whispers of small communities fighting for survival. In the tense silence that followed, a single crow cawed from the branches overhead, a grim reminder that nature, like people, took sides. Marcus's mind flashed through memories nights on patrol in the Indian Ocean, waking to the smell of salt and diesel, saving his brother from another mother, Toro, from drowning in brotherhood and gunfire, and then returning home to find the same forces of greed and violence uprooting everything he loved. But here beneath the tree, whose rings held centuries of tribal wisdom, He felt the weight of a deeper duty to protect the legacy of those who came before him and the promise of those yet to be born. Officer Ortiz approached, his brow furrowed. I got the preliminary intel. They've forged water rights, claimed environmental permits. They think bureaucracy will wear you down before you even lift a finger. Ortiz ran a hand through his hair, the epitome of law enforcement trapped between paperwork and real justice. Marcus caught the flash of guilt in Ortiz's eyes. Laws meant to protect often became weapons of the powerful. No law, Marcus said quietly, can match the law written in this tree's bark. He traced a carved symbol, a circle with an arrow, the emblem of tribal unity etched by his forebears. That symbol was a beacon, an unbroken circle that resisted every attempt to divide its people. Behind them, Jamal and Elena unpacked crates. Jamal clicked a timer on a small device. Elena calibrated a long-range scope. The neighbors' white-black Latino native farmers and ranchers lined up behind them, unwilling extras turned soldiers. Their eyes burned with a fierce resolve, the same resolve that had seen militiamen block logging roads, activists shield pipelines, and elders hold council fires against the tide of erasure. Marcus lifted his watch. 30 minutes, he announced. He drew a weathered compass from his pocket, a relic of old missions, and flipped it open to reveal a shattered photo beneath the lid, him and Toro, as boys grinning with mismatched braces. They don't know this is my home, my brother's childhood, and our community's last outpost. They think they're negotiating with an old man. They're actually walking into a guardian's domain. A soft wind stirred the sequoia's needles, scattering motes of dust that sparkled in golden light. To the untrained eye, it was a picturesque farm. To those who understood it was a fortress forged from solidarity. Lynn whispered into her mic. The people here aren't just watching history, they're making it. As the first SUV rolled to a halt at the gate, its engine cutting off with a hollow thump, Marcus felt the apex of tension tighten around his chest. Would he bluff them into retreat, or would he have to reveal the strength hidden in every whisper of the valley? He squared his shoulders, feeling the pulse of every soul behind him, and took a single step forward. The gate creaked open. And in that pregnant silence, Marcus remembered Toro's final words before they parted ways on distant sand. Always have my back. Tonight it wasn't just brotherhood on the line, it was the future of Redstone Valley. A hand reached for the door handle of the SUV. Time stopped. Next move would decide everything. They brought a contract, not a gun, until they did. Both. Marcus growled as the first man in the black suit stepped out and slammed the briefcase shut with a metallic click that echoed under the sequoia's canopy. The gate swung open, and 4 polished SUVs rolled onto the gravel drive. Victor Toro Rivera. The man in the center adjusted his cufflinks and smiled, cold, practiced like a performer who's mastered every line. Mr. Hayes, he began, voice smooth as oil. Let's not make this ugly. Marcus braced himself, feeling the pulse of every heartbeat behind him. Lynn's camera lens, Ortiz's concealed badge, Jamal's gloved fingers on the detonator, Elena's eye on the sniper's crosshairs. Marcus stepped forward, hands empty. My land's not for sale, he said evenly. Your money, your shell companies, they don't change the history carved into these redwood rings. He tapped the sequoia's trunk, as if proving some ancient covenant. Toro chuckled. We respect history, he said. That's why we want to invest clean energy project community jobs, a new chapter for Redstone Valley. The lie hung in the air, heavy as exhaust. Behind Toro, 2 men in identical suits eyed the barn. One raised a hand, tracing the outline of a drone silently hovering above. The other wore a name tag, council liaison. Marcus caught the look. Bureaucracy had become another weapon as lethal as any rifle. He glanced at Ortiz. The officer's jaw was clenched. The law was a badge, but not always a shield. Toro took a step forward. 3 million cash. Walk away and no one gets hurt. He paused, eyes flicking to Jamal, who had planted a charger beneath the gravel. Think of your neighbors, Mr. Hayes. Farmers, elders, kids. They'll thank you. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. He inhaled, seeing instead of the SUVs, the faces of the Valley the Nguyen family tending rice crates, the Kootenai elders lighting a council fire, the Ramirez kids chasing goats at sunset. He saw the promise of unity in every ring of this tree. If he backed down, their story vanished. If he fought, blood would spill. But Toro didn't know one thing: Marcus wasn't alone. "Your offer's generous," Marcus replied, voice calm. "But you forgot our deal." He clicked his watch. Half a mile away, disguised floodlights cut power to the SUVs. Backup generators hummed to life around the farm. The flickering glow painted the sequoias' rings in ghostly silver. Jamal's low-frequency jammers pulsed, severing drone feeds. Elena's sniper nest sealed off the road behind them. Toro's smile faltered. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the strobe of farm lights. "What the council liaison stumbled, his radio crackling to silence. Marcus advanced another step, every motion precise, lethal. "This is community defense," he said. "We warned you." Toro's mask slipped. Recognition flared in his eyes, the ember of a shared past. He opened his mouth as if to speak a brother's name, but the words froze. In that heartbeat, Marcus saw more than an enemy. He saw Toro's face, chiseled by war, and lost the same face that once laughed beside him on a foreign shore. For a fraction of a second, everything froze: the hum of generators, the drone overhead, the distant whistle of a single crow. Then Toro nodded imperceptibly to his men. "So you really are Corsair," he whispered. "Just like I thought." Marcus felt blood roar in his ears. A knife-edge decision lay before him: raise his rifle or reach across the chasm of their past. The sequoia's needles shivered above, as if urging him toward its unbroken circle of unity. And in the hush that followed, Marcus realized this fight was no longer just about land. It was about two brothers torn by war and memory, standing on opposite sides of a battlefield they both once called home. A distant siren wavered on the horizon. Next move would decide everything. "They thought they were negotiating with ghosts until we became theirs," Marcus' growled, voice low and resonant, as the floodlights painted long shadows across the gravel. In that moment, under the ancient sequoia, he let every heartbeat echo the promise he'd made to protect this valley, or die trying. But now the man he once called brother stood before him, gun half-raised, eyes flickering between memory and duty. Toro Marcus breathed the single name carrying a lifetime of battles, both shared and betrayed. No sooner had the syllable left his lips than Elena's suppressed rifle barked from the ridge, the crack of the shot sending two bodyguards sprawling to the ground. Jamal triggered a chorus of controlled blasts from the gravel beneath the SUV tires, flipping one vehicle onto its side in a sculpture of twisted steel and dust. Nearby, Lynn's camera caught every frame in hushed awe, knowing this fight would ripple far beyond Oregon's borders. But even as the cartel's hired guns scrambled, Marcus didn't roar into the fray. He advanced with uncanny calm, every muscle coiled, every breath measured. Patched into his wrist comlink, Ortiz's voice cracked. "Reinforcements are en route. 5 more SUVs, state troopers' license plates." Marcus closed his eyes for a fraction, a flash of turquoise water, where he and Toro had swum as boys laughing beneath a desert sun. Then he opened them, narrowed and resolute. "We're not giving them the valley," he replied. "We're giving them a lesson in who protects the land." As the night air thickened, he pressed a button on a rusted barn door. Hidden behind stacks of hay, his command center flickered to life. Drone feeds, infrared maps, social feeds flooding with Lynn's live stream villagers, sharing the story of two brothers opposing corporate violence. Dozens of tendrils of light pulsed across tablets in kitchen windows, cell phones in barns, radios in patrol cars. This wasn't a private war. It was a community uprising, and every neighbor was watching. Suddenly, Toro dropped the briefcase, the impact setting off another charge, this one sending sparks cascading, illuminating the carved symbol on the sequoia's trunk. The circle and arrow glowed like a beacon, unity in resistance. Toro's face twisted. He realized the full measure of the trap. "Marcus, stop," he yelled. "This isn't you." But Marcus didn't flinch. He stepped onto the overturned SUV, raised both hands, not in surrender, but so his voice would carry. "I am Corsair," he declared, "and tonight we fight for every farmer, every tribal elder, every child born under this tree." From the darkness beyond, new headlights pierced the night. 5 SUVs' headlights sweeping across fields and fences where unarmed neighbors formed human barricades. Their flashlights bobbed in solidarity, guns holstered, but hearts steeled. Marcus met Toro's gaze one last time, saw a fracture of doubt, a longing to return to brotherhood. Then the state trooper plates rolled onto his trap-laden driveway tires, crunching toward the crossroads of justice and tyranny. As the first trooper kicked open his door, Marcus whispered to Lynn's camera, "This is where the world decides what side it's on." He drew a breath, ready to meet the next wave of challenge. And in that pregnant stillness before the storm of steel and steel mandates, the valley held its collective breath. "They sent the cavalry thinking it'd break us," Marcus said, voice steady, as the growl of a distant engine rolled over the valley floor. Under the sequoia's vast branches, floodlights from state trooper cruisers cast long, shifting shadows that danced across the faces of his neighbors, united by dirt-streaked hands and unwavering resolve. The barn's hidden speakers crackled to life with Lynn's live feed. "You're watching Redstone Valley's stand 2 brothers, 1 destiny," she narrated, her voice barely above the hum of adrenaline. Marcus felt each heartbeat pound like a rallying drum. He turned to Officer Ortiz, whose uniform now felt as much a shield as it did a cage. "They think badges mean blind obedience," Marcus muttered, eyes tracing the blue and white cruisers. "But justice lives in these fields." He raised a clenched fist, not to threaten, but to rally. From the grain silo to the cattle pens, women and men farmers and tribal members stepped forward, forming a living line. Ray, an elderly Kootenai elder, carried a carved wooden staff topped with an eagle's head, its wings spread in eternal flight. That staff, Marcus knew, symbolized watchfulness and freedom, virtues the valley would not surrender. Behind him, Jamal guided 2 neighbors to armored tractors, their front blades stripped of paint and repurposed as barricades. Elena signaled from the ridge vantage points were locked down. Lynn panned her camera across the sea of resolute faces, Latinx ranchers in bolo hats, African-American dairy farmers in flannel, white wheat growers in smeared boots. Here every creed and color stood as one. The troopers disembarked, weapons lowered, but eyes wary. Their captain, a hardened veteran named Reynolds, stepped forward under the sequoia's watchful boughs. "Mr. Hayes, you're under orders to disperse. This standoff can end peacefully, sell the land, walk away." His voice crackled through a bullhorn, an echo of bureaucracy echoing against raw humanity. Marcus swallowed, then unlocked his communicator. "Captain Reynolds?" He began, voice calm, but resolute. "I respect your badge. But you serve people, not corporations. This valley is sovereign by blood, by birthright, by every ring in that tree." He pointed to the sequoia's trunk, where generations of names and dates formed a living ledger of struggle and triumph. Reynolds hesitated, scanning the carved names: Chief Running Elk, 1851, Marisol Alvarez, 1923, Ella Hayes, 1978. He furrowed his brow. "This isn't in my report." "That's because you're reading the wrong one," Marcus replied softly. "Justice isn't printed on paper, it's written in hearts." He turned, and the crowd parted as Ray raised his staff, carving a circle in the air. Silver motes from the floodlights caught the carved arrow at its center. The symbol of unity ignited something in the trooper's eyes, recognition that this line was not just steel and tractor blades, but the embodiment of community will. In that suspended moment, the world seemed to tilt. Marcus felt Toro's presence behind him, no longer an adversary, but a fractured brother tied by history. The roar of the trooper engines faded as hooves clattered from the paddocks. A herd of horses ridden by local youth galloped toward the barricades in a celebration of solidarity. Their riders raised clenched fists, and the air filled with thunder and hope. Captain Reynolds lowered his bullhorn. "Stand down," he ordered. "No more aggression." His voice carried the weight of recognition, authority tempered by conscience. Around him, the troopers holstered their weapons and stepped back, forming an unspoken truce line. Marcus exhaled, feeling the valley's pulse settle into a triumphant calm. But as he locked eyes with Toro, he knew the truest battle was still to come, not against badges or bullets, but against the scars of their shared past. The sequoia's needles quivered overhead, as if whispering the circle remains unbroken, but the next page is unwritten. A single hoofbeat echoed in the hush. Next chapter awaits. They brought federal agents thinking paperwork could undo our stand, Marcus whispered, voice hoarse, as FBI SUVs rolled through the dawn haze of Redstone Valley. Under the ancient sequoia's crooked boughs, he watched Special Agent Sarah Martinez step out, badge glinting in the early light. Cameras from Lynn's live stream still streamed on every phone screen, capturing this moment of uneasy transition, one fight over another beginning. The sequoia's trunk, scarred by bullet impacts and patched with resin, seemed to watch him. Each dark mark was a testament to Resistance Nature's own memorial to those who refused to back down. Marcus closed his eyes, drawing strength from the tree's ancient rings, a silent vow echoing through centuries of tribal elders, settlers, and soldiers who defended this ground. He straightened his shoulders and faced Martinez. "Agent Martinez," he began, voice steady, "I'm glad you're here. You've seen what happened. Our people stood unarmed, yet unseen weapons saved the valley." He gestured toward the human barricade neighbors, clearing fields, shutting gates, guiding horses. "This isn't about guns. It's about community." Martinez studied him, brows knitted. "We've got reports of armed intruders, environmental sabotage, trespassing. The department wants full statements, evidence collection. I'm here to help, but also to reinscribe this valley into the rule of law." She sounded empathetic, but Marcus sensed the unspoken. Their next move could undo everything built in one night. Jamal appeared beside Marcus, handing him a folder stamped Evidence Operation Sequoia Shield. Inside were neatly cataloged drone footage, click-stamped timestamps from Lynn's livestream testimonials, from the tribal council, the local sheriff's written reprimand of cartel activities. Every piece of proof painted a vivid portrait of corporate aggression and community defense. Yet Marcus felt the weight of disclosure. Some truths once revealed can burn bridges as deeply as bullets. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "This valley survived because we protected its story, our story. But there are layers they won't understand: the legacy of broken treaties, the courage of farmers who never thought themselves soldiers, the oath written into this tree's bark long before any federal decree." He reached out, tracing his finger over a carved arrow in the trunk, then looked Martinez in the eye. "If you're here to enforce the law, know that our law lives in unity, not statutes." Martinez nodded slowly. She clicked open her notebook. "We'll need written statements, photos of the damage, interviews with witnesses, and your brother Toro Rivera, he's in custody. He claims we overstepped. He wants an attorney. Are you willing to testify?" Marcus felt his breath catch. Toro in handcuffs in an FBI holding cell was more than an adversary. Now he was a DOR damaged by war and forced into crime. Marcus's heartbeat hammered with conflict. Deliver Toro to federal justice or protect him as family. He thought of Toro's silent nod under floodlights, the flicker of regret in his eyes. This was a crossroads of blood and law. "Toro saved my life once," Marcus said quietly. "He's made choices I can't excuse, but he's still my brother. I'll testify truthfully. But know this, I'll be fighting for his story too. Because justice isn't blind, it's seeing every face, loving every history." A breeze stirred the sequoia's needles, scattering resin droplets like liquid dawn. To the world, Marcus was a farmer turned defender. To his heart, he was a brother torn between two kinds of duty. And as Sarah Martinez lifted her pen, waiting for his words, Marcus realized the battle for the valley's soul had only just begun. Outside, the first tendrils of sunlight painted the fields gold, and the tree's shadow stretched long, an unbroken circle, awaiting the next chapter. "They sued us, saying our roots were lies," Marcus muttered, staring at the stack of legal briefs that towered over his kitchen table like silent invaders. Under the sequoia's watchful limbs, Redstone Valley had transformed from battleground to blueprint, a state-sanctioned rural defense training center complete with classes in tactical medicine, drone reconnaissance, and legal rights. But now the same structure meant to legitimize their fight had become the target of corporate lawsuits and government audits. Special Agent Martinez sat across from him, pen poised over her report. "They're challenging the historic preservation," she explained, softly tapping a paragraph about contested tribal artifacts. "And the environmental claims they've filed for soil tests. This could drag us into court for months." Her eyes were kind, but Marcus saw the unspoken dossier in her expression, sympathy mixed with duty. He knocked back a swallow of strong coffee and stood pacing the sunlit kitchen. Every step echoed with memories: Toro's hesitant grin on the battlefield, Gibson's ranch hand lending a rifle drill to teenagers, Lynn's live stream reaching millions in a single night. Their victory had birthed a new front, a war of paperwork and public opinion. He ran a gloved hand over the carved circle and arrow on the kitchen counter, a small wooden replica of the sequoia's emblem. That symbol had united farmers and tribal elders, but now it was being dissected in depositions. Marcus Ortiz's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got more corporate lobbyists are pushing state legislators to revoke our training grants. They're using your own victories against us." The tension coiled tighter in Marcus's chest. He looked out the window where recruits practiced sniper drills and medical triage under the oak grove. Their determined faces reflected hope, not fear. He closed his eyes and drew in a deep breath, tapping into the same inner reservoir that had guided him through ambushes and Brotherhood's betrayals. This fight wasn't about territory anymore. It was about the right to define their own destiny. "We built this on trust," he said, voice firm. "Not contracts or permits. We have to lean into that." Lynn burst in, camera in hand, breathless. The community's rallying, farmers blocking access roads in solidarity, elders organizing public forums, volunteers cleaning up the disputed sites. They're turning these lawsuits into a movement. She paused, eyes shining. "But they need a focal point, something real." Marcus nodded and grabbed his jacket. "Then we give them one." He led Ortiz and Lynn out into the dawn, where the training center's sign now bore a new addition. Beneath its crisp lettering, someone had painted the sequoia symbol in bold sky-blue strokes. At the edge of the field, Toro, released on bail, stood holding a weathered drum carved with the same arrow. His eyes met Marcus's with that old fraternal spark. As villagers gathered around, Toro struck the drum once, a resonant beat that rippled through the morning air. Farmers laid down their legal briefs on the sign's post, elders recited treaty verses, youth raised phones in a unified live stream, and troopers lowered their shields in silent respect. The legal papers fluttered to the ground like white petals. In that electric stillness, Marcus realized the real power of Redstone Valley wasn't in courts or contracts, but in collective purpose. The next wave of attacks would test them in a different arena, the hearts and minds of a nation. And as the sun fully rose behind the sequoia's towering crown, its first golden light ignited a promise that no lawsuit could extinguish. What comes next will define us all. They thought a single lawsuit could silence us until all of Redstone Valley rose. Marcus said, voice steady, as he stood beneath the sequoia's sprawling crown, now bathed in the golden glow of dawn. His hands rested on the rough bark, tracing the circle and arrow symbol that had become the valley's emblem of defiance and unity. Behind him, the fields rippled with activity. Families gathered to plant new saplings. Where scorched earth once lay, elders led collective blessings for every plot of ground reclaimed, and youth laughter echoed as children chased the wind across the pasture. Special Agent Martinez approached quietly, her notebook tucked away. She paused beside Marcus, taking in the scene, an entire community renewed not by law books or court orders, but by a shared vow written in the sequoia's rings and etched in each neighbor's heart. "You've changed what it means to protect your home," she murmured, her tone a mix of admiration and realization. This isn't just survival, it's transformation." Marcus nodded, eyes scanning the horizon where the training center's workshops glimmered with fresh paint and solar panels. Toro stood nearby, hammer in hand, driving a final stake into a new fence post. For a moment, Marcus saw his brother in the way he moved, deliberate, dedicated, no longer driven by shadows of past regrets, but by a purpose greater than either of them had ever known. Justice, Marcus began, voice soft but unwavering, was never meant to be a transaction or a trial. It lives in the relationships we nurture, the promises we keep, and the resilience we pass on. He turned to Ortiz, who was leading a group of off-duty troopers in an impromptu cultural exchange, learning tribal song, verses from Ray the Elder, who had once carried only a ceremonial staff, now teaching new anthems of solidarity. On the opposite ridge, Lynn's drone hovered, capturing the valley's renaissance from above quilt-like fields, everyone working side by side, symbols of unity painted on barn roofs, visible for miles. She keyed her mic, whispering, "They thought they could divide us, but they only made our roots grow deeper." In that moment, the sequoia's giant silhouette seemed to lean toward them, its needles stirring in a silent applause. Marcus felt a fierce warmth surge through his chest, a blend of pride and humility. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded photograph, him and Toro, two boys by an oasis, unaware of the battles to come. The edges were frayed, but the smiles were eternal. He held it aloft. "This is why we fight," he declared, voice carrying across the fields. "Not for power, not for profit, but for every face in that photo, and for all the faces who will stand here years from now under this tree." He pressed the photo against the trunk. The community gathered in a slow circle around him, hands reaching inward, touching one another in a living chain of trust. As the sun climbed higher, its rays filtering through the sequoia's limbs like strands of hope, Marcus realized this chapter was ending, but the story was far from over. The valley would grow, evolve, face new challenges. Yet beneath every storm, every lawsuit, every threat, there lay the same unbreakable root, people choosing to stand together. He stepped back, letting the moment linger, a living testament to what ordinary people could achieve when they became guardians of their own destiny. And as the wind whispered through the sequoia's ancient rings, Marcus knew the next page would demand the same courage, the same unity, and the same unspoken vow: Redstone Valley would never fall. What comes next? Only time and the people will decide.